And I now invite the distinguished representative of Pakistan to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation aligns itself with the explanation of position delivered by Italy on behalf of the Uniting for Consensus group and has a few remarks in its national capacity. Pakistan welcomes the adoption of the oral decision today to roll over the negotiations on Security Council reform within the IGN process. As they say, better late than never. We commend your support to the process, Mr. President, and to our co-chairs, the permanent representatives of Austria and Kuwait. They have done exceptional work to advance the process of Security Council reform at the 77th and 78th sessions of the General Assembly. Last year, we agreed on enhancing the transparency and inclusivity of the IGN process through webcasts and the repository of its documents. This year, the activist approach of the co-chairs has led to a significant expansion in the convergences and reduction of divergences on the 5 interlinked clusters. The co-chairs were also successful in promoting consensus despite the obstructions from one particular country on the language to be inserted on Security Council reform in the Pact for the Future. Mr. President, my delegation welcomes some of the significant convergences as reflected in both the revised elements paper and in the language for the Pact. These include agreements on 1. The IGN process is the legitimate and most appropriate platform to pursue Security Council reform. 2. All 5 clusters are strongly interlinked and therefore negotiations should be based on the principle that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. 3. The need for the increased representation of developing countries and small and medium-sized states, including small island developing states in the Council. 4. The expansion of 2-year non-permanent seats. 5. To treat Africa as a special case to redress the historic injustice against it. 6. To ensure the equitable geographical representation of all regions, including cross-regional groups such as the Arab and OIC groups. And 7. That if the veto cannot be abolished, it must be restricted and not used against proposals to prevent and/or end genocide and other mass atrocities. Mr. President, the IGN discussions and informal interactions also revealed an emerging recognition that the regional approach as proposed by Africa, the UFC, and the Arab and OIC groups offers the most likely avenue to develop the widest possible agreement on Security Council reform. We trust that at the IGN sessions next year, Member States will be able to build further on the important convergences. In particular, we should fully explore the regional approach to Security Council reform, including through further and more active consultations with and among cross-regional and sub-regional groups, including the African Union, the Arab Group, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Mr. President, my delegation would like to caution, however, that the intention to develop a consolidated model for Security Council reform still faces significant difficulties. Such a common model can only be developed once there is full convergence on the 5 interlinked clusters for Security Council reform. The discussions on the language for the Pact of the Future illustrated the difficulties in text-based negotiations in the absence of convergence on the 5 clusters. Text-based negotiations cannot commence, nor artificial deadlines be set until there is full convergence on the 5 clusters. Therefore, the work on the IGN next year should focus mainly on reducing the persisting divergences on the 5 clusters. In particular, there is yet no convergence on the exact size of an expanded council, the various categories of membership that have been proposed. Clearly, there is no agreement on new permanent members, but a combination of regional seats based on the African proposal and the long-term or re-electable seats proposed by the UFC group may provide the possible basis for convergence, and on the question of veto. Mr. President, it is regrettable that the adoption of the oral decision was linked by one delegation to the negotiations on the language for the Pact of the Future. Such crass tactics, pressurizing the President and the co-chairs, caused the delay in the adoption of the oral rollover decision until today. They deserve to be repudiated by the Assembly. This episode, however, revealed who among member states is responsible for impeding and obstructing the progress on Security Council reform. I thank you.